know that in Kelseyville, right on the lake level, down where it's really fertile soil, that is a really good area for Sauvignon Blanc. So how do those fit into our master blend? And then we'd get ahead of ourselves up there, and then we'd start working down in Monterey for the same thing. At the same time, buying more and more Napa fruit, because the bigger we got, the more expensive grapes we could blend into our blends, because I was deferring the cost out into these other appellations. So the biggest thing that's changed for us is the amount of farming or the amount of grapes that we're buying. So, in the old days, probably when I met Scott, I probably had crusted, somewhere around maybe our first time we got over 500 tons. And today we'll buy 1,800 tons of grapes spread out across almost all of the farming communities, farming appellations in California. And we make wine this year at 11 different wineries. That's what I was working on before we started the Zoom. And then we use our same model that we used at Napa Wine Company, which is one winemaker and one cellar worker on site at each custom crush winery. And then using that to monitor all of the grapes coming in, all the fermentation protocols, all of the blending, all of the racking, and everything that we're trucking out. And so we've done that now in 11 wineries. So for instance, in Monterey, there's a winery down there we love called Monterey Wine Company. And we do a huge amount of work there. We make most of our rosé there because they have really good presses and really good white wine settling tanks. The big Cabernet push for us is at a winery called TCC, which is down in San Luis Obispo County, right in Paso, essentially. And so that's another one that just happens to have a lot of really good red fermenters. There's another one here in Napa called Carneros Vintners, the Ranch Winery. We're just spread out everywhere with that same model, a winemaker and a cellar worker in every single one. And we treat them as an isolated winery. And then we bring almost everything back here to Napa and blend it. And then we bottle 75% of everything we make in town of Napa. There's a little bit still bottled here in Santa Elena, but it's not the most advanced bottling line. So there's some high speed, really good ones that Trinchero has in the town of Napa. Did I answer your question somewhat?
Yes, you did. You did 100%. And from what it sounds like you're saying, there's this micro macro. I'm trying to keep my hands down because I really need a manicure. The micro macro way of working that, right? Because so what did you say? Monterey Wine Company and TCE, is that right?
TCC, yeah.
TCC. So you don't own those wineries, but you work with them.
No, we have one winery that's in Yountville. And that's where we do all the Napa Cab, a lot of Zinfandel, because Zinfandel is so early. And a lot of times we're trying to save the tanks at other custom crush facilities for Sauvignon Blanc coming in, because Zin and Sauvignon Blanc are about the same time frame. And so we usually will save the white wine tanks at custom crush and bring the Zin into our winery there in Yountville.
Got it. Well,
but what's even more interesting, right? So if you think about it, right, we're roughly somewhere around 2,800 acres in California, and we have, let's call it 15,000 barrels now spread out. And so barrels have become the latest juggernaut for us. So at that winery in Yountville, we have about 900 barrels of mostly Cab, a little bit of Chardonnay there, and a fleet of stainless steel barrels for Chardonnay. And then over at the Ranch Winery, which is the big one on Zinfandel Lane, there's probably 5,000 barrels of 815 there. And then when we rack that, then we bring it over to Main Street facility, one of Trinchero's big facilities here. And then we've got another about, maybe 8,000 barrels there that will be the second tranche of barrel work. And then it goes off to be to the bottling line. So it's this crazy Rubik's Cube of barrels that we're always managing and always adding to. And the reality is, I think at our price point, for a, sub $20 bottle of Cabernet, I don't think there's anybody out there that has one appellation diversity that we have in our Cab program, as well as the barrel program. I mean, just nobody's been able to build the barrel regime as we have. And it's just because I got lucky along the way and was able to keep it and expand it. And it's also how we deal with volume changes all the time. We always make more wine than we need, and then we just sell off the extra bulk.
Well, I guess that has been one of the most interesting things to me in learning about, like, in preparing for this, is how you can, I mean, you're not a small winery, but how in the world of big wineries, you, it seems, keep this like very specific ethos of staying very connected to all of the regions into which you've expanded. And that seems like, from my imagination of it, like an incredibly difficult task, I guess.
So we haven't changed them. We've gotten a lot bigger, right? What has changed for us is learning to deal with bigger volumes. Most of the time when a brand grows like we do, you end up changing your winemaking regime different. You ferment in much larger tanks, or you downgrade your fruit. As we grew, I just was able, because we didn't have one big winery, so we would add wineries. And so what we've done is, instead of going to bigger tanks, we've just gone to more tanks. Instead of going to bigger vineyards, we've gone to more growers, more variation in fruit. And that's because of Elisa and Sarah at the winemaking helm. They don't want to compromise anything when it comes to it. And the diversification in fruit is good. Now, it's not good when we have like the fires, because the fires in 17 took out a lot of our Napa fruit out of our programs, because we hadn't picked hardly any of that yet. So, that was the biggest change that we've seen, or the biggest vulnerability we have in the way that we make wine is when there's something devastating to one region, it really hurts our blending programs. But then we also have the advantage of, we always make more wines. We're able to compensate for that by some of our other vineyards, like coming out of Sonoma and out of Paso. So we got somewhat lucky on that. But where we really have seen, like, the big ability to make what we think is better wine than what we think is out in the marketplace at our price point would be like Sauvignon Blanc. In 17 was an amazing white wine vintage, and there was really great Sauvignon Blanc you could buy up and down the coast. In 18, it was much colder and it wasn't as ripe, but we had the ability to have much larger diversification just because we have so many extra grapes. So we were able to make what we think is great wine. And of Sauvignon Blancs, I think one of the best ones that we have made to date is the 19, which we're bottling today. The 19 to me has all the qualities of the 17, of that like great integrated sweet acid fruit, tons of tropicalness to it, but it has this amazing citrus, like sweet peach to the mid palate. I think it's, I don't know, I think it's one of the best ones we've done. I mean, you guys have 18 right now for a cold vintage. I think that wine shows really well, but it's also taken months for it to like sweeten up, much longer than I anticipated.
And why was that?
It's a much colder vintage. So the structure, you can read a million different winemaking magazines. They'll tell you all the different things. Every other year is a better year for the plants. So maybe it was that. Maybe 17 and 19 are meant to be better. It was a colder vintage. The areas like in Monterey that we really like, and in San Ynez Valley that we like a lot, those were younger vineyards, so they didn't quite have the depth yet. We saw in 18, the Lake County fruit wasn't as good. Lake County can be amazing, but it wasn't as good as the 17. So there's just all these curveballs. But that wine really is an example of the state of California for growing Sauvignon Blanc, because it is spread out all the way, literally from Mendocino to Santa Barbara. It's like the largest swath of all of California. There's a little, I think we touch every county. There's a little bit from the Delta. There's a little bit from out in Borden or Lodi area, Santa Cruz, Monterey, San Luis Obispo, and as far south as San Ynez, as far south as you go in Santa Barbara.
From a diversification standpoint, I, as you know, work mostly with French wines. And so as you're talking about this, I'm trying to think of a French winemaker I know who's as involved, if they're talking about 2017 for Sauvignon Blanc in France, who is able to talk about the whole country from the very top to the very south. And that's not something that is really spoken of. And I think that there are a lot of downsides to that, especially when it comes to climactic catastrophes such as hail and the things that we've seen in France. And I just think that it's pretty extraordinary that you've been able to pinpoint micro regions throughout the country that allow you to express the entire state as a vintage. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and a lot of it's by trial and error because we'll go down and you got to remember, right? I mean, you go stand in a vineyard and it's like pretty and it's great and the grower's really nice and he brought you a sandwich and you buy a lot of grapes and the grapes suck. So, I mean, it's not every vineyard that we contract is great. So we always have to have extra. Not every good vineyard produces great grapes every year. Now, it's a little hard when you do vineyard designated stuff. And like when I first met Scott, we were selling him mostly single vineyard Zinfandel. I mean, you would have a rough year in Zin and we would still sell it to him. And here we're able to basically take out of the herd the vineyards that we don't like each year in our big programs, which is 815, Sauvignon Blanc, Chardonnay. And it allows us to be, I think, quicker on our feet. And then we still got all of our weird, goofy stuff, that we love, right? It's like the Oregon Pinot, the Pinot Gris from Oregon, Santa Barbara wines, but they're nowhere near the size or the importance of, or not the importance, but the amount of focus that we give on the big stuff.
Well, apparently in the 1800s, I also was reading that Chasselas was quite the hit. Did you know that?
No.
Chasselas was like, why? So, okay, there's a great publication that your region comes out with every year that has a detailed list of the price per tonnage and the vintage and anyway, they've been doing that since the 70s. And in the 70s, they start talking about the reintroduction of Chasselas, which was in the 1800s, apparently really widely planted.
I got to admit, even at my Santa Rosa Junior College grape variety ag class that I took, I don't remember that one.
I thought you were going to tell me your grandfather invented it.
Yeah, Rich Thompson made it up, I'm sure, in that
class. So then how has, to touch back on the progression of things, how has the culture of California as a whole and winemaking specifically changed since your dad and since your grandfather were there?
I mean, it's just way more complicated now. There's a lot more money involved in it. I mean, you just go back to, okay, so we started in 1996. If you go back to, just year 2000 at Napa Wine Company, I mean, you would go through and you would see so many of these small vintners were there today that are big vintners now. It was like this amazing college of winemaking, which Napa Wine Company still exists, but I mean, it's so much more expensive to get into the game today that we don't have that young creativity anymore. It's few and far between. I mean, you got cool people like, Dan making Massican or something like that. But, in the late 90s and early 2000s, the cost was half, if not less, to get into the game. Now to make wines around here, you're going to pay $5,000 to $10,000 a ton for fruit, and you're going to pay, $1,000 plus a ton just to ferment it. And it doesn't allow for, old school scrappy winemaking. I mean, I got started with, basically a few $1,000s on credit card checks and buying Zinfandel and borrowing barrels from my dad. So there was no real money invested in when we started in 96. And today to do that would be, suicide. If you ever did the business plan, it'd be really hard to start. And here in Napa, Sonoma as well, all of the trends are that the people that are starting wineries today, right, are coming at it as a second business. They've been successful somewhere else. So the game has been upped everywhere. And so that's why you don't see the creativity here in the North Bay anymore. You see it coming out of areas like San Luis Obispo or Monterey or Amador County and maybe Mendocino. And so it's just changed dramatically. And if you go back to my dad's time, the comment that you hear around here the last 2 weeks is that Napa feels like it did in the 70s. Before I got on this call, I walked to the hardware store. I walked across the street and didn't even wait for the crossing walk light to let me go through. It's never like that on a Wednesday at 3 p.m. There's no cars on Main Street. So that is what the 70s was like here. This is still ag. Half those vineyards were walnuts. They hadn't even been converted over to vines yet. You go back to my grandfather's era and, the grapes were not the majority. Walnuts and prunes were still the majority. So, it's just evolved into an adult Disneyland here where we are. And think of how many more wine labels there are. I think the number when I got started that I'd always been told there was 400 brands in Napa County. and now I think it's something like 1,600. They're not all wineries here, but they're all labels produced from here. And that's, you can imagine how many private labels are produced around here. I mean, insane. And how many will be produced with the wine economy going sideways and this COVID-19 slowdown of expensive wines. There'll be a lot of new brands coming out that will not be their mothership brand. And that's, when Charles Beeler and Roger Scrimini and I started Three Thieves, we started making this jug wine right after 9/11 because the wine industry crashed and there was tons of excess wine out there. So we were just buying really good bulk wine and putting it in jugs. And for some reason it worked. Thank God.
Well, I mean, I think if you look at the retail, am I muted? I think if you look at the retail trends, that it's understandable why that worked, because, nobody stops. Very few people in a crisis are like, I think I'm going to go on a cleanse.
Right.
But
I think what the data that I've seen from Trinchero that's kind of interesting is people have really gone back to brands that they trust. It's like maybe they were experimenting outside their normal realm of varieties or brands, and they've kind of gone back to what makes them feel safe. And, maybe they were a Johnny Walker drinker and they experimented off of that. Now they're back to Johnny Walker. Maybe they were a KJ drinker. So I think we have definitely, for Joel Gott Wines, we benefited from that for sure.
Well, I think that, like I said, as somebody who specializes in French wine, I understand that it's going to be a harder thing to get Côte de Gascon at the same price point to move instead of Sauvignon Blanc. However, in the world of what you've built, that's why I was interested and am interested in how you've sustainably built these micro relationships into a macro brand, because pretty much no matter where I am in the world, which a lot of times is in bumfuck Nebraska, I can find a bottle of Joel Gott and know that it's not going to let me down. There's an interesting question that somebody sent in that relates to that. Let me find it.
Can I just comment on that?
Yes.
So, one of the weird things that Rhiannon and I deal with here is we get people that write these letters to us, right? It's all over email, right? Because nobody would ever call, right? And it's like, I've always loved Joel Gott. I've been a supporter for 10 years, and I don't know what happened, but your wine sucks now. I'll never buy it again. I bought this bottle of Cabernet. And then it's like, okay, then we do the makeup email. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I don't know if it was in transport. Maybe it was corked. Hey, can we send you some wine? We haven't changed anything we're doing here. So then, we'll mail, they say they had one bad bottle of Cab. We'll send a 6-pack of assorted wines, right? And then we get the love note back. It's so great. I must have been a fluke. Sorry to even write.
Yeah. That's also the great thing I think about alcohol. From the bartender's standpoint up, almost 100% of the time, free alcohol solves the complaint. If you're having a miserable time, here's some free alcohol. Calm F down, It's universal in our industry. Okay, so the question to the consistency, and like I said, your wine has saved me from a sea of Mayomi many, many times. What quality control steps do you take prior to bottling, given the consistency of your wine? Also, given the volume of wine you make, we already talked about that. So quality control steps prior to bottling.
We love crossflow filters. We like resin filters. So that is a very soft, gentle way of filtering. So we're a big fan of that, but that's pretty much, we've been on that for about 15 years. That's kind of industry normal now. And then we are not a fan of, there's a lot of stuff you can add into wines, chemicals to make them stable so that they're very consistent. We don't believe in any of that. So we still throw a lot of tartrates. We still have cloudy wines. But if you strip all that out of the wines and make them really stable, they lose their soul. They lose that weird little acid structure in the mouthfeel. So we're a big fan of kind of old school classic winemaking of, make the best wine you can, get it as stable as you can without stripping the acid out of it, filter it, and don't add anything pre-bottling, but make sure your bottling lines are very good. So for instance, Trinchero has a lot of bottling lines, and there's a great name, bottling line number 4 that we love. And it's this incredible bottling line that they have down in town of Napa. And that's the one that we spend most of our time. That's where we're bottling Sauvignon Blanc today. because we think it does a really good job. The fill head's really good. We hardly get any dissolved oxygen pickup. It has really good sparging. And, technically speaking, it's a really great piece of machinery. Other stuff that we try to do that just so we're not a big fan of adding additions, but is during juice work. So, trying to do a thing called float, where we're trying to get the sediment out of the wine faster with something like Sauvignon Blanc. We're also looking at, how clean can we rack wines, so that we're not having to filter additional times later. That's where, like when it comes to a Rubik's Cube, having so many small tanks of Sauvignon Blanc, mathematically it's a pain in the ass, but it really makes a difference later. The less time you touch or the less touches to the wine, the better off you are. So there's a weird balance of that. And then making sure that our barrels are clean. We have so many barrels, and it's kind of like if you've got one sick kid in a classroom, right? Get that kid out. So we do run a lot of tests on the wine to make sure that we don't have anything growing in the wine. You don't want any bacteria start picking up, weird VA sort of like acid VA fingernail polish smells. And so we're always very clean in our winemaking. Hopefully that answered it.
Yeah, it definitely does. And it's impossible for me not to think about make testing jokes about how much testing capacity you have. I also think if we're talking about your wines contextually and that price point, there's to what you said about when you filter, when you find, the more times you touch it, the more kind of, I think of like a Stepford wife on lithium, which is sometimes how I feel about that price point. It's like all of these bottles are just like the exact same, instead of something that is not flawed, but something that has like a personality,
Well, we hear that all the time, right? And it's always either when we're releasing something that is a big vintage change, right? Stylistically. So when we go from the 17815 to the 18815, you're going to have a lot of people comment about, oh, their winemaking's changed. That's all Mother Nature, right? Because we try to make the best wine we can from the vintage, not the most consistent wine. So 18 is like super sexy, big and rich, kind of sweet, darker. 17 has way better structure to it. If you could meld the two together, it'd be perfect. But, you'll see the amazing texture of 17 will kind of go away to the bigger, sweeter, darker mouthfeel, red, dark, black fruits of the 18s. And then we'll hear about it with Sauvignon Blanc release. We're going from a cold vintage to a ripe vintage in the 18 to 19. So we'll get the same type of email correspondence either from reps or from customers like, what the hell happened? I'm always like, I don't know what happened. I like this current one better. So, it's a little bit of trying to do the right thing for the vintage.
Well, I think that there's, and again, from like a Eurocentric point of view, it seems to me that there's a perception that that California has like vintages, instead of like Europe has vintages, right? And so I think that if people's expectation is that 17 tastes like 18, tastes like whatever, then we're back in Stepford County, like I said, which is boring.
Well, the biggest thing we've had around here, honestly, to deal with by far has been fires. And fires, we haven't figured it out. And so if anybody has data on how smoke taint really affects wine, it's not really hit the industry yet, because what happens, if you have smoke taint in wine, you cannot get rid of that wet campfire smell. So we have, in the last 3 years, last 4 years, we've had dramatic fires every year, right? It's like the new normal around here. And so if vines haven't been picked, and especially if they're at the point where they're going through veraison, the fruit's unusable to us. So that's been the biggest wild card. California is pretty mellow. Hardly do we have really big frost. Hardly do we have rain during harvest, although we had it last year. So we don't have dramatic stuff. So, I will say France has it much worse with the dramatic freezes and the dramatic rain and temperature swings.
Well, I also think that that's underscored by a lot of winemakers who try to make the same wine vintage to vintage, instead of, like you just said, highlighting, I prefer this, and lucky for you, you prefer that. Some people like ketchup on their eggs, and I like sriracha like a normal person,
I think it'd be really hard to make the wine taste the same every year, but I don't think we've ever tried.
You should drink Mayomi more often.
Joey Wagner. No, when we owned the ranch winery, Joey had just started as Joe Wagner, who makes it or who sold it anyhow. And so he was there. So I got to watch that process when you're first making it, man. It was like mad science. We leave, I shouldn't say anything. Anyhow, it was super fascinating winemaking. I'd never seen anything like it.
Well, I'll let people chime in to that in secret so that you can delete the addresses if you need to. We have a quick fire round, which I'm excited to get to, but there's another question that has come from a couple of people about women, specifically about your wife and the role that she has played and currently plays, and other female winemakers that you work with.
All right, so here, the quick structure is, so our winemaking team, we are 34 people right now, and it's really there's me, so I'm kind of off to the side. And then there's Sarah, whose background was a winemaker, UC Davis to become a vet. Turns out she doesn't like blood, likes wine. So goes in the winemaking program, gets out, works in Australia, comes back here, gets an internship at Joseph Phelps, gets hired as the enologist, the chemist, promoted to the assistant winemaker, promoted to the head winemaker, and she was there for 10 years. And from, I don't remember, I think it was 97 through 02, she was the head winemaker working for Craig Williams. So that was her biggest, achievement of making, her insignia wine. And then she went to Quintessa, and now she just makes our wines. While she was at Joseph Phelps, Elisa Jacobson was one of her interns. When Sarah went to Quintessa in 03, we hired Elisa as our first employee. Elisa, who's now the head winemaker here, learned from Sarah the winemaking world, and is a really good taskmaster and has helped create the whole production world that we live in today. So Sarah and Elisa are the two at the top of that. And then, so you've got Sarah, Lisa, and then Nicole and Olivia and Jill. So the next three girls down in there that are all assistant winemakers, and they're the ones that are all watching out every single winery out here. What are we doing? What's happening in the two wineries down south, what's happening in all the wineries around here. And so, and then we have what you would call like an enologist or a lab person in each one, which then there's, you kind of trickle down to three more girls. And they are watching, the analysis and the wines coming back. And then we just hired two guys to the winemaking team, a guy named Ryan, who's going to run one of the facilities down in San Luis Obispo County that we are thinking is going to become one of the big facilities, and another guy from a Napa winery up here named Dustin, and Dustin is going to run our winemaking program at Hoffman Lane. So that is kind of the pyramid. And then when Sarah left Phelps, 2 years after that, we hired Julio Ramirez, who's the head of our production. He was a Phelps guy as well, a Joseph Phelps guy. And so he has assembled a team of about a dozen guys that are all spread out into the wineries. And actually, I think it's 18 guys and a couple girls in there that are spread out watching all the work being done at the wineries. And then up in Oregon, our one out of state, we have Rich Marinoff, who's the head winemaker up there, and who ran the co-op up there, the big winemaking co-op, and one lady who is the enologist in the lab up there, and then the head of our grape growing, Mitchell Klug, who runs California, but he actually lives up there too. So there's the pyramid. Did I make that transparent?
Yeah, I guess that's what I meant earlier about how micro you are in the macro reality that your business is in, which is really cool.
But remember, we're weird, right? So, Scott, who I know is on mute, will attest to this. There's no salespeople. I tried that once. That doesn't work. There's no general manager here. We're not like your traditional business. We're all about winemaking and grape growing. And then we deliver the cases to Trinchero, and Trinchero does the marketing and they do the distribution for us. So all we really want to do is make wine, drink wine. And, so it's literally on the sales side, it's just me. And so it's a really good relationship. If you like making wine, having a big brother like Trinchero is amazing because it allows us to just focus on what we want to do.
Well, I feel like you've made it the smart and unfortunately rare decision to surround yourself by women, which I'm sure also helps. And I think in the world of Trinchero, it's, like I said, less common to have such a sense of identity and a sense of person behind brand. Like you taking time out of your day to talk to us. In that vein, are you ready for rapid
That's
fire?
why I'm getting texts from the ladies in the winemaking office. What the hell are you doing? I need this or I need that.
They're probably right. You ready for rapid fire questions?
Yes, please.
Okay, so in my mind, this happens like free association. So you can answer as quickly or as long as you want, but the idea is quickly. Who are you quarantined with?
3 teenagers, my wife, 2 dogs, 2 cats, 2 donkeys, and 5 goats.
God, who cooks the most?
By far me.
Who cleans the most?
Nobody.
Who does the dishes?
Usually slave labor of teenagers.
That's I feel like that's the thing. What games do you play? Have you been playing besides do the dishes?
Drinking a lot of mezcal, and then there has been everything from bocce to outdoor soccer. There was quite a game of in-house tag the other night that got the kids and I in trouble with Sarah, and a lot of mountain biking. But that's not a game, but that's been what's happening.
Do you turn them into the Olympics, like the family Olympics? It's a suggestion if you're not doing it.
Yeah, it's more like family battle. Who
wins the most?
I'll say me for sure.
Okay. What if I asked Sarah who wins the most?
Oh, Sarah, for sure.
And what if I asked your teenagers?
Them.
Okay, that's another good case to make it into the Olympics. The first place that you will go when this is over?
Out to a restaurant to eat.
Which one?
Anyone here in Napa that's got the door open. I've been trying to buy food from as many of the restaurants that are doing takeout as possible. I just want to go into a restaurant, order margarita, order calamari. I want to be back in that vibe.
Yeah, I feel that way. Also, there have been multiple times in my own quarantine where I've wanted a moment. I keep trying to not swear, which is very difficult for me after knowing you for 15 years myself. I just want to go sometimes and have a glass of wine anonymously for Christ's sake. That safe space is gone. Okay. The first international place that you'll go, or the first vacation place that you'll
go? Probably to Tahoe this summer.
Desert Island book.
Desert Island. Oh, book? What book would I read on a desert island?
Yeah, one book.
I'm not really a reader.
So a thesaurus.
Yeah, sure. Dictionary.
Okay. In that same vein, your favorite online resource for continuing wine education?
I got to say it changes all the time. I think Wine Business Monthly does a really good job on consolidating news articles from the industry, and I always like news. The girls here, the winemaking team really likes UC Davis Extension information because I think they do a good job on feeding it. Cal Poly is starting to do a really good job on that as well.
Are those free?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Go to ucdavis.com.
Good to know. Okay. What was the last wine you drank? Mezcal doesn't count.
Rosemary Cake Breads Albarino from El Dorado County, and then Les Galets from Charles and I in France. I bought some Vinica 2018 Sauvignon Blanc. That was a couple nights ago. I had a really kick-ass margarita to go from Mustard's Grill that was definitely overserved. I think those are the last ones.
Okay, good ones. I like that there's no Grand Cru in there. Very relatable. What was the first wine that you made that you were proud of?
Probably, look, it was just amazing to be making wine anyhow, but the 99s to me were incredible because 99 was the first year that we made Sauvignon Blanc that didn't have Pinot Grigio blended into it. So that was really good. And that was 99 Zins were incredible. You go back to the 99 Turleys, those are so 99 was the vintage for me that's blew me away. And then I would say the 17 Sauvignon Blanc, because that's a benchmark wine for me. And the 2012 and 14 815. The 1999 Unoaked Chardonnay, which nobody bought, but I still have 800 cases of it. That one was amazing. Yeah, I'll bring it next time I come to Colorado.
I feel like you should send some and just see if we can maybe do a pre-sale on it.
Yeah, I'm happy to send you guys wines. I don't know how I would do it, but I could figure out how many people are we on with. Where's the number I saw? 47. It's not even 5 cases. We can figure out a way to sip wine.
That would be really, really interesting to try 1990 unoaked Chardonnay for a million reasons.
That's 99.
99, that's what I meant.
Yeah, from Atmosphere.
Especially because that's exactly 20 years ago, right? 21 years ago. My subtraction skills are terrible. What is the wine that you're most excited about making in 5 years? And you can cheat by saying region.
Honestly, it'd be whatever next evolution of white wine it is that people in America want to drink. Something with acid, something that doesn't have too many barrels in it. That's probably what I'd be most excited about. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay, good one. Acceptable answer. The last thing that I want to talk about, I know we're already getting long in the tooth here with time, but the elephant obviously is the virus and everything that has disrupted all things. So I want to hear about what Got for Good is, what it was, and how it's evolved, how you've evolved, and how as a company Got for Good has.
Well, so the whole thing was really started by a guy named Mark, and Mark Dunley. And Dunley had this idea that just watching what we were doing anyhow, and he's like, well, why don't we try to figure out a way to get people to partner with you to raise money for food banks. It was as simple as that. So we did it. We committed, I think, $50,000, and we were able to triple that instantly with donations.
Wow.
And then it snowballed. So this year we're hoping that we can maybe even get $250,000 to $500,000 of money, like cash donated to the food banks through Feed America. And there's huge grants out there, and there's huge matching funds. And so that's how that number grows so big. So to me, it's great. And only, once you go to a food bank, right, all of a sudden you realize how many people they feed every day. And so you can imagine what they're feeding today, right? Like insane number of people.
Can you explain Got for Good too, just in case people on here don't know what that
is? It's just a matching dollar for dollar program that we're doing through Joel Gott Wines to Feed America. Feed America basically is a way to funnel money into local food banks. So like around here, it's the Solano one. So out in like Vacaville, that's where the big food bank is. And we have local like food pantry here in town that can get money out of that, but it's really going after the big food banks. And it's a super easy way to donate and then get your money doubled into the food bank world. And in today, it's like super meaningful. So many people right now, what is it, like some insane number, 12 million people on unemployment, so it probably is double that. So, 24 million people without a job right now. And how fast will the economy turn back on? So we're going to do, just between Gott's and Joel Gott Wines, we're going to supplement the one that's over in Sonoma and the food bank that's down there in Solano, just to try to protect, our local backyard. And then we also, for Gott's, we have a meal program. We're cooking food for all of our staff. We've kept almost everybody on the whole time. We've closed 2 restaurants. We've got about 80% of the people still working. So we're hoping that the world turns back on quick, like I'm sure you guys are. I know you guys are.
I think that hearing people's response, especially high-profile people's response, it's so personal and private. We don't talk about money and where we put it and that sort of thing, and delicate because of that. I just think that like videos of people sharing groceries make me cry, like harder than The Little Mermaid did.
Well, look, the most meaningful thing that we've been able to do, the winery's in a pretty good position, just because there was that panic buying. So, as our restaurant business, we have 380 people that we work with. And so, they're all family, and we got to figure out how to make sure that, one, that they're taken care of, and 2, if we ever want to reopen, that everybody's got a job, and how do we keep the businesses alive? And we went through hell with that Federal CARES Act, trying to apply for those loans. We still don't even know if we're going to get those. And so we're just looking at this as like, how can we make sure that people are still fed? And so we're cooking internally for our crews, trying to send home dinners. as well as trying to just use 100% of our sales going to our employees. And that's just because our payroll is bigger than our revenue is. But I will hand it to all the restaurant guys, man. They are so scrappy with how they will sell stuff, because all the managers, they're incentivized to try to retain as many of their employees. So the bigger the revenue, the more people they can give hours to. We got people running orders blocks away. We got a mini drive-through set up at our St. Helena restaurant. They commandeered a van from a friend, so they're doing deliveries. I mean, it's all sorts of stuff that I would never agree to. We've agreed to now, but it's great. Everybody's got involved, so super fun.
Well, I feel like that's kind of exciting in the same way that you were talking about Napa in the 70s and how slow is now. That sort of like kinetic, well, fuck, we have to do something to be able to survive this. I feel like some of the ideas that have come out, I think have been really extraordinary.
No, man, you hear great stuff. Like, I know that on Monday night, Thomas Keller was the one who was serving all the fried chicken out of the to-go window down at Ad Hoc.
Oh my God, amazing. I didn't know that.
Yeah, no. I mean, there's all sorts of great stories out there. Hey, man, if there's a time to come to Napa and eat anywhere you want on a discounted budget, it would be this summer. Plus, there'll be no traffic.
Well, if nobody else has any other questions, I know I told you 30 minutes and I'm loquacious, I'm sorry. But unless there's any other things that you want to talk about.
No, wait, just a big thank you to Team Synergy. I hope you guys are all doing well. I would say that in my business career, my winemaking career, I've gotten a lot of advice from Scott over the years. So wouldn't be here without Big Scott, as well as I drank way too much wine with Scott over all these years. So he's also contributed to my liver probably failing someday. But I'm just glad you guys are all right. I'm glad that 47 people tuned into this. And if I can ever do anything for anybody, you guys have an account that went through hell and you need me to FedEx a magnum of something, or you need an extra sample of something, or you need me to write a thank you note on a fancy piece of paper to somebody, let me know. Or if you got a winemaking question, my mobile number I'm sure is in here, but it's easy. My email, whatever. If I can help in any way with any customer or for information, just let me know. And thank God for sympathy.
Thank you for, like I said, thank you for, in a lot of ways, keeping many people at Synergy employed with the brand recognition that you offer given this time. Thank you for taking the time to be able to talk to us and there are people on this meeting from Florida and from New York so thank you for prioritizing that in your.
Yeah. Hey, anytime, call back. I'll even have my nice prison wall behind me again if you want.
I'm going to send you letters yourself just for that so you can put something up. If everybody unmutes themselves to say thank you, now would be an appropriate time. If you feel like it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joel.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joel.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.